In public, Saudi Arabia says it wants peace, that it has always supported a diplomatic solution, that its commitment is to dialogue, that it never wanted this war. That is what they say in public. In private, according to the New York Times, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been pressuring Trump for days to do exactly the opposite, to not stop, to completely destroy the Iranian government, to carry out ground operations, to seize Karg Island, the exporting heart of Iranian oil. His argument: this is a historic opportunity to remake the Middle East, and that if Trump withdraws now, Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf will be left alone against an Iran that is furious, humiliated, and will not forget what has happened. But there is a brutal paradox in all of this. Because while MBS pressures for the war to continue, Iranian missiles are hitting Saudi refineries. Gas facilities in Qatar are in flames. The Emirates have shot down 17 drones and 5 ballistic missiles in a single day. Kuwait has damage to its power grid. The Gulf countries are not just allowing this war to happen, they are being dragged into it. And some, as we will see, are pushing so that it doesn't end. This is the story we are going to tell today. Because what is happening in the Gulf is not just a war between the United States and Iran. It is a complete reconfiguration of power in the Middle East. And the Gulf countries are at the center of it, even if in public they pretend they are not. Before getting into the heart of the story, you need to understand the position of the Gulf countries in this war. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain. All of them are Persian Gulf monarchies that share a fundamental characteristic. They have spent decades living with Iran as an uncomfortable and threatening neighbor. Iran has funded militias in Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria. It has launched attacks against Saudi oil facilities. It has harassed maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz on multiple occasions. And for years, these countries have attempted a strategy of appeasement. Saudi Arabia normalized relations with Iran in 2023, with China acting as a mediator. The Emirates also sought to improve ties with Tehran. The logic was simple: if you can't beat them, negotiate with them. That strategy died on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury. Because as soon as the bombings began, Iran responded with thousands of missiles and drones. And the first to receive them were not the Americans or the Israelis. They were the Gulf countries that host U.S. military bases: Bahrain, home to the Fifth Fleet; Qatar, with the Al Udeid Air Base; Kuwait, with the Ali Al Salem Air Base; the Emirates, with the Al Dhafra Air Base; and Saudi Arabia, which initially refused to let the U.S. use its bases, and only allowed it after receiving the Iranian counterstrike. Suddenly, all these countries found themselves at war, without having declared it, without having chosen it, and without knowing exactly how to get out of it. If this war seems so complicated that it is hard to follow, subscribe. Here, we explain everything from scratch, without assuming you already know anything, and with verified data in every video. Let's look at the specific data, because it is devastating. Since the war began on February 28th, Iran has carried out a systematic campaign of attacks against the energy infrastructure of the Gulf countries. These are not isolated incidents. It is a deliberate strategy. If your economy hurts, if your oil hurts, if your electricity hurts, perhaps you will pressure your American allies to stop. These are the most serious verified episodes. Qatar, the world's largest gas plant. In mid-March, Iran struck the Ras Laffan liquefied natural gas (LNG) facility twice in 12 hours. Qatar Energy confirmed a ballistic missile impact. It took firefighters hours to control the blazes. The Qatari government stated that repairing the damage could take 5 years. 5 years. Ras Laffan is the largest LNG plant in the world. It supplies gas to Europe, Asia, and practically every country that depends on LNG as an energy source. 5 years of damage to that facility is not just a war headline. It is a long-term global energy crisis. Saudi Arabia. The Red Sea refinery. Iran attacked the Samref refinery in the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea. Samref is a joint venture between Saudi Aramco and ExxonMobil. Saudi Arabia had been using the Red Sea route as an alternative to the Strait of Hormuz to export its oil. That alternative has now also come under attack. In Riyadh, the capital, air raid sirens wailed. Ballistic missiles were intercepted. During a high-level meeting of Arab and Islamic foreign ministers, CNN journalist Nick Robertson described hearing the detonations of the interceptions less than a kilometer from where the diplomats were gathered. United Arab Emirates. Gas facilities in Abu Dhabi temporarily closed after debris from intercepted missiles fell nearby. Interceptions occurred near Al Dhafra Air Base. On March 24th, the Emirates shot down 17 drones and 5 Iranian ballistic missiles in a single day. 1 military contractor was killed and 5 soldiers were wounded. Kuwait. The Mina al-Ahmadi refinery was attacked by Iranian drones, sparking fires. Kuwait's power grid reported damage from falling drone debris. Sirens sounded on multiple occasions. Bahrain. Air raid sirens sounded twice in one night. An Iranian drone struck the Crown Plaza Hotel in Manama, causing a fire. In response to all of this, Iran published a map. Through the semi-official MER agency, it precisely identified the energy targets of all these countries with a message that left no room for interpretation. Say goodbye to electricity. Among the targets identified, the Al-Khobar power plant in Saudi Arabia, 4,000 megawatt capacity. The Ras Tanura oil and gas complex, the Jebel Ali desalination and gas complex in the Emirates, the Dubai solar park, and the Al Zour power plant in Kuwait. This is not bluster, it is a target list. Now we move to the story generating the most conversation in international diplomatic circles this week. The New York Times published a report on Tuesday, March 24th, based on people familiar with conversations between high-ranking Saudi officials and the Trump administration. The information is explosive. According to these sources, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, has been privately pressuring Trump for days not to stop the war, to keep bombing, to completely destroy the Iranian government, to carry out ground operations, to seize Karg Island. His argument, according to the sources cited by the NYT, is that this represents a historic opportunity to remake the Middle East, and that if Trump withdraws military pressure now, Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf will face a humiliated, furious Iran alone, an Iran that will be desperate for revenge. It is an argument with its own internal logic. The problem is that it has massive consequences. Think about what that means. The leading Arab country in the Gulf, the world's largest oil exporter, whose facilities are being attacked daily by Iran, is privately asking for the war not to end. He is betting on the end of the Iranian regime as the only viable solution. But at the same time, in public, the Saudi government denies everything. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has always supported a peaceful resolution to this conflict, it stated officially. They deny that MBS is pressuring to continue. How do we explain this contradiction? The media outlet El Español summarized it perfectly. Saudi Arabia wants the war, but it doesn't want it known that it wants the war. There are very specific historical reasons for this double stance. In the 2019 attack attributed to Iran against Saudi oil facilities in Abqaiq and Khurais, Saudi Arabia temporarily lost half of its crude production. That event scarred MBS deeply. It proved that even with all of Saudi Arabia's wealth and the American security umbrella, Iran could strike at the heart of their economy whenever it wanted. What MBS calculates now is that if the U.S. withdraws before destroying the Iranian regime, that Iran will remember it was Saudi Arabia that allowed the use of the Taif air base, who turned a blind eye while the Americans attacked, who pushed for more in private. And that makes Saudi Arabia a primary target for retaliation. Analyst Yasmin Farouk from the International Crisis Group formulated it precisely. Saudi Arabia wants the war to end, but how it ends is what matters. There is a second, even deeper reason. MBS has spent years trying to turn Saudi Arabia into the hegemonic power of the Middle East. That project has one main obstacle: Iran. If the Iranian regime disappears or is so weakened it cannot project regional power, Saudi Arabia would fill the vacuum. It would be the undisputed leader of the Arab world and the essential interlocutor for any external power wanting to operate in the region. That is the historic opportunity MBS speaks of in private. But within the Saudi administration itself, there are voices warning of the risk of that calculation. If the war is prolonged and Iranian attacks intensify, Saudi energy facilities could suffer irreparable damage. Saudi oil needs to reach the markets. If Hormuz remains blocked and the Red Sea route is also under attack, the kingdom decapitalizes itself. And then there is the Trump factor. Because Trump does not want an infinite war, Trump wants a deal he can sell as a victory. And that deal, if it comes, may not satisfy the ambitions of MBS. It is important not to lump all the Gulf countries into the same bag, because their positions are different. The United Arab Emirates has a more pragmatic stance than Saudi Arabia. It has publicly called for strict compliance with international law, and for all parties to avoid attacking vital infrastructure. It is a much more neutral language than Riyadh's. Dubai is one of the most important financial centers in the world. A prolonged conflict destroys that reputation and scares away investment. At the same time, the Emirates hosts the El Dhafra base used by the United States and remains a target of Iranian attacks. Their interest is for the conflict to end as soon as possible, but in a way that does not leave Iran in a position to continue threatening them. Qatar is the most paradoxical case. Qatar has the Ras Laffan LNG facility, which was attacked with damage requiring up to 5 years of repair. But Qatar also hosts Al Udeid, the largest American airbase in the Middle East, from where a large part of the operations are coordinated. At the same time, Qatar has more complex historical relations with Iran. They share the world's largest gas field, the South Pars/North Dome. The Qatari foreign minister called the Israeli attack on South Pars a dangerous and irresponsible step. Qatar wants all of this to stop, but it cannot say it too loudly without irritating its American ally. Kuwait has been hit systematically. The Mina Al Ahmadi refinery, the airports, the power grid. It is probably the country that most desires a quick ceasefire. It is small, it doesn't have the geopolitical weight of Saudi Arabia or the Emirates, and its room for maneuver is minimal. Bahrain hosts the headquarters of the American Fifth Fleet. That makes it a priority target for Iran and ties its hands and feet to the American strategy, whether it likes it or not. What unites all these countries is the same fear. If the U.S. withdraws without having definitively neutralized the Iranian capacity to threaten them, they are left alone against a neighbor with a very long memory. There is something that is rarely discussed in the analyses of this war, and that has come to light this week in all its starkness. The allies do not agree with each other. Trump wants a deal. He has paused the strikes for 5 days. He has said the negotiations are going well. He has spoken of a joint control of the Strait of Hormuz with Iran. He has said oil will drop like a rock if there is a deal. MBS does not want any deal. According to the NYT, the Saudi prince considers Trump's willingness to end the war a mistake. He wants to keep attacking Iranian energy infrastructure. He wants ground operations. He wants the end of the regime. Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, is in an intermediate position. He wants to destroy the Iranian nuclear program and weaken the regime to the maximum. But at the same time, he does not want a completely failed Iranian state, because that would generate chaos that would also threaten Israel. And Iran denies there are any negotiations while it keeps firing missiles. This fracture among the allies is one of the most dangerous variables of the entire situation. Because if MBS convinces Trump that continuing the war is more beneficial than negotiating, the 5-day pause becomes a dead letter. And if Trump goes ahead with negotiations against MBS's wishes, The relations between Washington and Riyadh could deteriorate seriously. There is a precedent that is hair-raising. When Israel attacked the South Pars facility at the world's largest gas field, Trump said publicly that he didn't know about it, that he hadn't been consulted. In other words, the most important U.S. ally in this war took a unilateral decision that almost triggered a massive escalation without notifying Washington. If Netanyahu can do that with gas, MBS can try to press for much more. The game of alliances in this war is as complicated as the conflict itself. Do you think Trump should listen to MBS or close the deal with Iran? Leave me your opinion in the comments. Let's go to the question that gives this video its title. Could this turn into a total regional war? First, let's define what total regional war means. It's not just more bombings. It means that the Gulf countries, which until now have been passive victims of Iranian attacks, become active belligerents. That Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Kuwait, and others start participating directly in military operations against Iran. Is it possible? The honest answer is, it is more possible than it was 3 weeks ago. Saudi Arabia has already taken a first step. Although it initially refused to let its bases be used to attack Iran, after the Iranian counterstrike, it opened the Taif air base to the Americans. This is a significant shift. It has gone from trying to remain neutral to becoming a platform for the offensive. The Emirates, with the Al Dhafra base and its geographical proximity to Iran, is another key platform. Their air defense systems have been intercepting Iranian missiles daily for weeks. The step that has not yet been taken, but which MBS is reportedly requesting according to the NYT, is active participation in offensive operations. Saudi or Emirati strikes against Iran. Support for a ground operation on Karg Island or other strategic Iranian positions. If that step is taken, the nature of the conflict changes completely. It would no longer be the U.S. and Israel's war against Iran. It would be the entire Arab Gulf region against Iran, and that would trigger an Iranian response against Saudi and Emirati targets, on a scale that would make what we have seen so far pale in comparison. Iran has already explicitly warned, any country that joins the attacks against the Islamic Republic will become a legitimate target. We must take that threat seriously because they have already followed through. Qatar hosted an American base. Qatar received missiles. Kuwait hosted an American base. Kuwait received attacks. The Emirates host an American base. The Emirates are being attacked daily. The escalation is not in the future. It is happening right now, gradually, almost imperceptibly, in the day-to-day headlines. But accumulated, it represents the greatest regional security crisis since the Gulf War of 1991. Everything I am telling you has a very concrete translation in the global economy. The Ras Laffan LNG plant in Qatar, damaged with the potential for 5 years of repairs, supplies liquefied natural gas to Europe, Japan, South Korea, and India. If that capacity remains reduced for a prolonged period, gas prices in Europe, which already lived through a brutal crisis in 2022 due to Ukraine, could skyrocket again to unsustainable levels. The Yanbu refinery in Saudi Arabia, hit by Iran, processes crude from one of the world's most important producers and sends it west through the Red Sea. If that route is also compromised, Saudi oil has no safe way out. S&P warned this week that stagflation alarms are flashing in the Eurozone due to the war in the Middle East. Stagflation is that especially harmful combination of high inflation and slow economic growth. It is exactly what happened in the 1970s with the oil shocks. The Philippines has declared a state of energy emergency due to the consequences of the war. Bangladesh closed universities early for the same reason. Pakistan declared a 4-day work week. The Euribor, the index that determines the variable mortgages of millions of Spaniards and Europeans, shot up this week to nearly 3%, its largest jump since 2008. All of this is already happening. And if the war expands, if Saudi Arabia becomes an active belligerent, if Iranian attacks against Gulf infrastructure intensify. What we have seen so far is only the appetizer. Let's put everything together and draw the most important conclusions. What has fundamentally changed this week? The war has stopped being between two clearly defined sides. It is no longer just the US and Israel against Iran. Now, a third actor is forcefully emerging: the Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia, who are privately pushing for the conflict to continue and intensify. This creates a new and more dangerous dynamic. Because if Trump wants to negotiate, and MBS does not want him to negotiate, the pressure on Trump to break the pause is enormous. And if Israel launches another operation without warning, as it did with South Pars, the entire diplomatic architecture collapses in hours. The three major tensions that will determine the future. First tension: Trump versus MBS. Trump wants a deal that lowers oil prices and gives him a peace narrative. MBS wants to use the window to destroy the Iranian regime. One of the two will have to yield. And the history of this relationship suggests that Trump is susceptible to the economic and strategic arguments of his Gulf allies. Second tension: the Gulf countries, between a rock and a hard place. They need the war to end because they are facing daily attacks. But they fear that if it ends too soon, without destroying the Iranian capacity for retaliation, they will be the first to suffer the consequences of an emboldened Iran. It is a genuine dilemma with no easy solution. Third tension: the global economy versus military logic. The longer the war lasts, the more cumulative damage to the region's energy infrastructure. Some of that damage, like at Ras Laffan in Qatar, could take years to repair. Economic logic says to stop now. The military logic of MBS says that stopping now would be a historic mistake. The most likely short-term scenario: negotiations between the US and Iran progress slowly and fragilely during the 5-day pause. Some minimal understanding regarding the Strait of Hormuz is reached. But Saudi Arabia continues to pressure in private. Israel maintains its operations. And Iran, which publicly denies any negotiation, demands conditions that the US cannot accept. The most likely outcome is neither peace nor total war. It is exactly what is most frustrating: a conflict that freezes in a state of permanent tension, with intermittent attacks, chronically high oil prices, and a region that learns to live with an instability that no one knows how to resolve. Now I ask you, who do you think will win this standoff? Trump with his bet on a deal, or MBS with his bet on total war? It is one of the most important questions of this moment. Leave me your analysis. I'm going to close with something that I believe is fundamental to understand about what is happening. There is a phrase from the Saudi foreign minister that perfectly summarizes the situation of the Gulf countries in this war. Referring to the Iranian attacks, he said, "The little trust that existed before has been completely shattered." That phrase matters because it reveals that Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries had been working for years to build a minimum level of stability with Iran: the 2023 normalization, the trade agreements, the de-escalation of tensions. All of that was built precisely because these countries knew that the US would not always be there to protect them. And then Trump arrived, launched Operation Epic Fury without consulting them, and in 24 hours destroyed all that diplomatic work. Now the Gulf countries are in a paradoxical position. They have been dragged into a war they did not choose. They are suffering daily attacks, and yet, at least some of them, starting with MBS, prefer that this war continue, rather than risking an outcome that leaves them more vulnerable than before. It is the logic of those who have lived for decades in fear of a powerful and hostile neighbor. And when they finally see an opportunity to eliminate that threat, they do not want to waste it, even if the price is continuing to receive missiles. Understanding that logic does not mean justifying it. The costs of this war for the civilian population, for the global economy, and for the families who have lost someone are real and immeasurable. But if you don't understand why MBS is doing what he is doing, you cannot understand why this war is so difficult to stop, and why Trump's 5-day pause could turn into smoke at any moment. We will continue to be here, telling you what happens, because this story is not over. If this analysis has opened your eyes, share it. And subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next video.